Hi guys, Dave Pinson here, Philippine Bible Ministry. Oh, I see I have my Padre shirt on. It must be baseball season. It's spring training right now. Anyway, be that as it may. Philippine Bible Ministry. Today, I want to talk about something that I almost skipped over. I was going through the story of Joseph, and this is a summary of the scripture. I don't read the chapter by chapter, verse by verse, but we're going through the stories from the beginning. We're in Genesis, right? So I got through the Joseph story, and I remembered because I was reviewing the video, because I always review these. I'll watch them later on YouTube to make sure that everything's right, and anyway, sometimes I'll pull them down when I don't like things. Maybe I said what I shouldn't have said. Maybe I didn't say what I should have said, or maybe I said too much. So sometimes I pull them down. So I was watching the one about Joseph, and I realized that I skipped right over the story of Judah and Tamar. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And just so you know, I will skip over stories in Scripture as we're going through this thing, because not that they're not important. Everything in the Scripture is important, but it's not quite as essential to the overall story of salvation and Jesus. And for example, when you get to the temple, it's to me it's not important what it's made out of and how many angels and how many pomegranates and some of this stuff is a little bit much. So I'll just sort of do a summary of what I think it means, and you can always go back and read it. I highly suggest you read word for word, cover to cover someday. That's a good start for any follower of Jesus Christ, because these are God's words. Anyway, so today we're going to be in. So we just finished the story of Tamar and Judah comes in right after he's sold into slavery. So Judah and Tamar. One thing to know about Judah that you need to know, if you didn't know, you probably do know if you're a believer, is that Jesus is a lion from the tribe of Judah. Jesus is a descendant of David, and David is a descendant of Judah. So Judah was where we get Jesus, where we get the kings, that's where the kings come from. That's why the lion represents a king. That's the reason for it, to be honest with you. Uh, so Judah and Tamar. So what happened? So Judah went out and found a wife, a Canaanite wife. Now, is this important that he married a pagan woman? Could be. It could be a problem. It was a problem for Solomon later on. It was a problem for Esau. It could be a problem that you marry instead of marrying the people from your own, at least people that know the Lord. It could be a problem, and it's a problem for us if we're unequally yoked. By the way, just so you know, we're not going to get into that right now. So it came to pass that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite woman, whose name was Hira. And so we're in Genesis 38. So Genesis 38 is where we're going to be. It should hopefully, I don't know how long it's going to take. So he married this Canaanite woman, and Judah, there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her, and he went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and they named his name She conceived again and bore another son. They called his name Onan. And then she conceived yet again, and the youngest was called Shelah. He was at Chizop when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. So I'm gonna get my son a wife. Here's your wife. And then it says, but was very wicked. So was very wicked. He was a very wicked person. So it said, so God killed him. So those are words you don't want to hear about yourself or anybody you love. And they were very wicked, so God killed them. So those are bad words. So anyway, so God killed the oldest heir. And so they had a tradition. Later on, it becomes law. Later on, when Moses comes on the scene, we get Leviticus, Deuteronomy, all that stuff, and we get the law. So later on, this became a law, but at this time, it was a tradition of the people of Jacob. If your husband died, you would marry the brother. You would marry the oldest brother, and then your child, your first male child, because he carries the name, would carry the name of his father. So in other words, if everybody had like whatever they had possessions, they had land, whatever. So that land belongs to your oldest, right? So if you die, then there's no one to give the land to. So the idea was to carry on the name. So then you would marry your brother's the brother of your husband who died, and then his job was to produce a child to give it to as if he was the heir of his older brother. So this guy's name was Onan. So Onan, instead of saying no, I'm not doing it, He actually does the worst. He does a devious thing because Onan was also wicked. Now, does this have anything to do with him marrying a Canaanite woman? Maybe, because the Canaanites, they were worshiping the demon gods, right? So anyway, so Onan goes into Tamar and he lays with her, but then instead of consummating it, he pulls out at the end of the act. Sorry, the Bible's not always rated G, and he emits in the bed, or emits on the ground. It says, and God got mad at him. So, so he's like, well, I'm going to go ahead and enjoy this, but I'm not going to fulfill my duty, even though that's why I married her. So that's pretty despicable. I know the whole thing sounds weird to us. Like, I don't want to marry my brother, my husband's brother. That's disgusting. But we're not in the time, and it's got nothing to do with how you feel about it. This is what happened. So then the father says, "You can marry my son Sheila when he's old enough. Meanwhile, you go stay over there, and you put on your widow's garment, and you just wait." So she waited and waited and waited. And then Sheila grew up and he became of married age. But the father was afraid to give him to Tamar because the father blamed Tamar. Well, this woman's already killed two of my sons. I'm not going to give my last son up. I only have one son left. And we often do that. We often blame the messenger, or we blame what happened on the wrong person. This is so common. So, it just reminds me of the story because I was reading this in Exodus, and I was reading in Exodus the other day, and the story where the other Levites were mad at Moses. Who are you? You take on too much. You think you're the ruler of us. We can do it. We can take incense to God. We're righteous people too. And Moses says, "Okay, let's have a contest tomorrow. You bring your incense. I'll bring mine. We'll offer it to God. We'll see what God does." So they go outside, and they're offering their incense in their censers. I think they're bronze censers or whatever they are, made out of metal, and all of a sudden, the Lord tells Moses something, and Moses says, "Get away from this guy and all his people." So I forgot how many hundreds of people got swallowed up by the earth, and the fire came out and swallowed them up. And the people blamed Moses, as if Moses had the power to open the earth and swallow. And so that's common. So she blamed Tamar. He blamed Tamar. So he's like, my son's not going. I'm not doing it. But he never told her. And she became desperate for a son because I don't know if you know that was the thing. If you read the scripture, that's so important. Somebody couldn't have a child. Somebody wanted a son. Give me a son or else I die. It's just very important in those days for a woman to have a son, and it was very important to her to honor the marriage. Not necessarily he was a wicked man. Maybe she didn't like him, but she honored the whole idea of it, right? And I need a son, heir. I need a son. And so he wouldn't do it. So what did she do? Well, so it said came a day when Judah's guys were sheep shearing. So he was going to go off. So this is a time when the guys got together and they went and sheared the sheep. And it sounds like it was a big party. I don't know. So they're working hard all day, and it sounds like they were drinking at night. I don't know what they were doing, but they were having some kind of a get to go over there. And she heard about, oh, Judah's going over there. So well, he's got to pass through here. So she goes to this isolated house. Apparently, it's an empty house, and she dresses up like a harlot. She covers her face with a veil. She wears whatever harlot clothes are. She wears harlot clothes, right? And he comes by and says, "Oh wow, that looks pretty good." So he offers her, to use her harlotry. He says, I want to sleep with you." So he sleeps with her, right? And then at the end, she says, "What will you pay me?" He says, "I'll go get one of my goats or sheep or whatever it was. I'll go get one of my goats and I'll bring it to you." And that would be my pay. That's a good payment in those days. That's, to feed you for a week or something. That's a good payment. So she says, "Okay, but just as a promise that you'll come back." What do they call that? Like collateral. As a promise that you'll come back, give me your staff and give me your ring, your signet ring, which proves it says I'm Judah, and your staff, which says I'm Judah. Give me those, and that way it'll prove that you'll pay me. Okay, that's fair. Here, I'll do that. So he goes and he tells one of his guys, "Go pay the harlot." She's over there in the road, and the harlot says she's not there. So he goes, "What?" So he goes, "She's got my ring. She's got my staff." So he goes back and he looks and he asks all the people around. They go, "There's no harlot that lives here. But we've been living here forever. There's no harlot that lives there." And she's gone. Meanwhile, she's pregnant. So Judah has actually impregnated her, right? And so she's pregnant and it starts to show. And somebody tells Judah, "Hey, your daughter-in-law is pregnant." Oh, that harlot. How could she? And he's angry. He wants to kill her. Bring her out, we'll stone her. How dare could anyone sleep with a harlot? How dare she be a harlot? Don't you know that's a terrible, disgusting thing? He's so self-righteous, right? And then she goes, okay, but before you stone me, I want you to know that the man who owns these things is the father of this child. Him. It's him. And he goes, okay. And he says, she's more righteous than I am. Well, there's a tricky thing to say. She's more righteous than I am, right? Why? Because they were both sinning. There was deceitful. It was just a second. It was devious. It was deceitful. It was what do you call it? It was fornication for sure. It wasn't adultery necessarily. Well, on his part, I don't know what his situation was, but it was. They both sinned, right? But she said she's more honorable than I am. Why? Because she tried to have fulfill the honorableness through the family. That's what she was trying to fulfill, the give me a child thing, right? So he just walked away from the whole deal, right? And then she bore two children, right? She bore two children. One of them's very significant. And it's twins. Do you remember? This sounds familiar. This sounds almost like the birth of Jacob and Esau. Right? So that's what happened. And then, hang on, just I gotta find this. And then it says, Genesis 38, verse 27. It came to pass at the time for giving birth that, behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was when she gave him birth that the one put his hand out, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand. But then the other one came out instead, and Breach, they named him Breach, which was Perez. His name shall be Perez, which means he broke through. Afterward, his brother came out, and his name was Zerah. So Perez. Now, why is this important? Why is this story? Don't you hate that story? There's a lot of stories I hate in the scripture. I keep telling you guys. A lot of people will say atheists or whatever. Well, the Bible is just a made up story, so people will follow God. If I was going to make up a story and I was going to have somebody be the great, 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 so many greats, 1,000 years, whatever it was, grandfather of Jesus, I wouldn't have him do stuff like this, right? And I wouldn't have the two sons go into Shechem and murder all this. There's a lot of things you would take out and say, no, they were all righteous people, they're good, and So that's one of the stupidest arguments you'll ever hear from the atheist. You wouldn't make up a story like this. That doesn't prove it's true. I believe it's true, but that's a dumb argument by the side. So Perez, why is this important? Well, we're going to flip over to the genealogy of somebody right now. Just hang on. Just half a sec. I'll be right back. So we go to the book of Matthew. This is why this is important. This is why Tamar is important. Because remember, Judah is the father, is the one who fathers the people who will eventually become the mother and father. Well, actually, the mother of Jesus and Joseph. Joseph is listed in the genealogies. I'll talk about that in just a second. Matthew 1, verse 2. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judah, and Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Sarah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and then it goes and Ram begot, and then it goes all the way down. It goes all the way down to Boaz and Rahab the harlot, and then it goes all the way down to Jesse and David. Jesus is the throne of David is Jesus, right? Then it goes all the way down to Joseph begot Uzziah, begot Jotham, Jotham begot Ahaz, Hezekiah begot, and I'm trying to fight. So I have a hard time reading through all these things. I just don't have the patience for it. So and then it goes all the way through the generations, and then it says, and Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary. So this is the genealogy of Joseph, right? Well, that's not the genealogy of Jesus. Well, he was considered his father. I mean, so the other genealogy listed in Luke is the genealogy of Mary, right? And both genealogies are important. That's why it's in the scripture. So because Jesus was thought to be the son of Joseph, so it's very important. It's very important. And so why is it important? Because we have a situation from a very sinful situation here that gave us the father of Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus. They gave us King David, for example. They're probably very, very important, right? And so why is that important? And also Rahab the harlot, who was the grandmother of Boaz. I think the grandmother of Boaz or the mother of Boaz. That's a whole other story. So we have a harlot and then we have an illicit affair, right? Why is that important? Because God redeems us, guys. It's very important because he redeems. He takes that which is yucky and sinful, like you and me, and he redeems us and he cleans them up and says, "It's okay. You're part of God's family." You see what I'm saying? So that one of my favorite songs, it says, it's talking about because of the blood, I'm now part of your family, Lord. So why did Jesus die on the cross? To bring us into His family. So that's why Tamar and Judah are in the story. So we're not going to talk about the genealogy of Mary right now, but it's also very cool. The genealogies are very cool, even though I zip right past them like I just did. So that's what I got about that. Tamar and Judah. Very strange story. God bless you guys. Ta ta for now.